Hi, I am Karina from VSys One, and today I want to show you what's new in VSys One within the eligibility intake checklist features. So let's dive right in. So today I'm going to be covering a couple new things that are really enhancing eligibility intake checklists. We have something called the bypass rules that has really been a game changer, especially when you have slight variations in checklists. If you have checklists that are almost identical with just slight variations, bypass rules will allow you to do basically just have one checklist, and you can set some rules so that certain items are not required by certain people. We'll get into that today. I'll also cover partial completion rules. So in instances where you require the volunteer to take an action and then the ball is in your court and they're waiting to hear back from you, you can set up partial completion rules so that the display is different or the wording is different, and they can kind of see that you are waiting on something, or that, just to check back for updates. We'll get into that as well. Prerequisites in checklist previously, when they're displayed on the VSys Live page, um, different items, any volunteer could click on any item in any order. It didn't require sequence, but now with prerequisites you can establish that sequence. So if they can't move into item B until item A is completed, you can set a prerequisite in that item B. So for this and so on. So you can set prerequisites. And then there's also some really cool stuff as far as making it look nicer. Some display options both within the checklist and within VSys Live. And then at the end, I will just kind of talk about just a few little best practices that I've seen along the way in using checklists. And so I want to share those with you. What I won't be covering today are just the basic checklist setup. So I am assuming that you have some basic working knowledge on creating checklists, the purpose of checklist, the different use cases, whether it's for onboarding, checking eligibility for a certain award or a certain position, or even just annual compliance. So I am assuming you have that knowledge. I also won't be going into the different items or the requirement types. The basic certification definitions or attachment types or training subjects, all of that. I'm assuming you've already established within VSys, and that you know how to do that if you needed to create those. I also won't be discussing the action links. So whether it's an agreement, an action link, the online training, the documents, so any finishing links that are set up within VSys Live and tied to the checklist, I won't be going over that. I also won't be discussing how to set up IntelliList or standard list in VSys One for the purposes of the bypass rules. We'll get into that in a moment, but I also assume that you have some basic working knowledge on how to create lists in VSys. And then lastly, how your checklist is assigned to a profile. I won't be going over that. So whether it's through an automation, whether it's through a manual process, whether it's tagged along through some other process in your onboarding, like an application form approval status, et cetera, et cetera. I won't be going into that. Again, that's assume that you already have that. So today we're just focusing on the enhancements of these other features that I just mentioned previously. And so the other thing too is I am focusing on VSys One, but these changes, if you have VSys Anywhere, can also be done in VSys Anywhere. I am showing you VSys One and assuming that you have VSys Live. Checklists can definitely be used without VSys Live. They would be an internal resource, an internal tool for administrators, if that would, if that's if you don't have VSys One. But the assumption is, the fun part is when we get to have these displays displayed for the volunteer on their end on VSys Live. So let's dive right in. So my first topic today is talking about bypass rules. And so I'm going to jump into my copy of VSys here. I'm going to go into eligibility intake checklists. And I have a very basic checklist here to start us off. And again, I won't be going into how to set up this top portion, how to put in instructions into your checklist. We're just assuming that you know how to do that. I'm going to minimize this top section, and I want to talk about bypass rules. So with this simple checklist that I have here, you can see that I'm requiring volunteers to complete some kind of orientation, a background check authorization, the actual results of the background check, and a code of conduct agreement that I want them to complete. So they need to have a certification in their profile. But let's assume one of these items is not required by all the people. I have it on my list, but not everyone needs to do it. So I'm going to use this new volunteer orientation as an example. Let's pretend that in my process, managing volunteers, that I only require this if they've never volunteered with this organization. I want to set up a certain group of people that would be bypassed. So what we want to do is use this feature here, bypass this rule if on lists. So I mentioned earlier, you need to have some working knowledge on creating IntelliList or creating standard lists in VSys One, and I've already created one. I've created one called Previous Volunteers with 25 plus hours. So I set up an IntelliList filtering for that, and what I want to do is set an exception. So if people fall up in this list, if they have previously volunteered with my organization and have that amount of hours, I don't want them to do this orientation. I don't require them to do it. So what I'm going to do is select this list. And as soon as I select this list, I'm given a couple options. It automatically it says minimum list to be on one. So obviously they have to be a part of that list to meet the bypass rule criteria. You also may have noticed that this is a multi-select. So I can pick several lists on here. I can say even minors under 18. I can say, hey, if they fall either on this rule or on this this list or this list, then they meet the bypass criteria and they will not be required to complete the steps to fulfill this requirement. I can also say, hey, they actually need to be part of both rules, both a minor under 18 and have previously volunteered. So I can set that up. But in my example today, I'm just going to leave it very simple and say previous volunteers, one list that I have. Another option that displayed for me is this checkbox. Don't show this item in VSys Live merge templates if bypass rules met. What that means is should the person who is a part of this list, who has previously volunteered and does not have to do the volunteer orientation, should they even see this item? You might say, yeah, actually, don't even show it to them. I want to just block it off completely. You might have noticed that your eyes may have noticed a change down here. There was an option for me to provide some wording if they did meet the bypass rule. I'll check it so you can see now. When bypassed, describe at. So I'm given the opportunity to add some wording. But if I hide the item altogether, then that's a mute point and it actually just disappears. So depending on your scenario, you may just want to completely erase this option and not confuse volunteers and not show it. But in my use case, I'm going to still display it to the volunteers, and I'm going to add some wording like requirement previously completed. And I'm going to leave it like this. And why? Because what I want to do is give some instruction down here and say, um, you know, whether you recently completed this training or have completed it in the past, all volunteers uh, must have working knowledge, something like that. And I can say, click here if you want to review the content. And I'm going to right click and edit as HTML. And where it says click here, I'm going to add a hyperlink. And it's just going to be my training. And it's a training that I already know the code for. So I'm going to put that in. And now it added a link. So I do want to display this to people even if they've bypassed, because I want to give them the opportunity to be able to see the training and kind of just do a refresher. Because if they bypassed this rule and were not required, they would not see this finish link leading people to the orientation. So that is bypass rule. Now, bypass rule, other use cases, I've seen where two checklists were created in organization, one for minors, one for adults, where a parental consent was required of the minors, but not the background check. And then vice versa for the adults. A background check was required, but not a parental consent. And in my previous experience, had to manage two different checklists, try to, figure out who needs to be added to which checklist. Now with bypass rules, we can just manage one singular checklist and put both the parental consent and the background check in the checklist and indicate the bypass. For example, parental consent, I would say if they are an adult, they don't have to do it. Or a background check, if they are a minor, they don't have to do it. So that's how you can utilize bypass rules. All right, moving on to our next topic, I want to talk about partial completion rules. So sometimes when people are, when directors or volunteer leaders are indicating certain requirements for the volunteer, there seems to be like a middle ground. Let's say you need them to submit an attachment or click on an application and submit additional information via an application. Some of those tend to be kind of a, the, they have multiple steps. For example, an attachment is uploaded, but you still need to review the attachment and vet it. Or an application is submitted and then, but you still have to review it and approve it. So when you have those instances where you have this sort of middle of the road and there's multiple steps in that requirement, you can utilize partial completions. And how they are helpful is it changes the display that the volunteer will see when they've done their part. We've had instances where, especially when it comes to attachments being uploaded or applications being submitted, that the volunteer will see the finish link in an item like this. So they will click on and they will maybe upload a document. But when they're returned back to the home page, the checklist still indicates, hey, this is incomplete. And although they successfully uploaded the document, they still see click here to incomplete. And what they do is then think maybe it wasn't received. So they'll keep uploading and uploading and uploading the same document over and over. So now we can fix that by creating partial completion rules. The requirement here for an attachment you can see is it needs to be approved. So when they upload the attachment and the default is pending, it doesn't meet the criteria, so the item isn't completed. But what we can do now is exit out of here, right click on the item and add a partial completion rule. What we can do now is create a new item, or it's kind of a child of this item. And I'm going to title it under review. And it's my same document, background, check, authorization. And I'm going to say when it is uploaded and in their profile, but with the status of pending, say this to the volunteer. And you can put some wording like file received, and maybe even some other instructions down here. Thank you for submitting your information. We will review it and update the status. Please check back for status update. So we're letting them know, we got it, thank you. Let's, now the ball's in our court and we can do something. And since I am not including a finish link, it's just informational, there's nothing they can do. There's nothing for them to click on, it's just a different view. And I will show you what that looks like on later on when I show you the display of VSys Live and how that looks like for the volunteer. You might also think, well, what if I actually got it and I processed it, but it's rejected and they need to redo it? Well, we can add another partial completion rule. So if I right click and add that, can say the same thing like um, rejected, and I'm going to title it the same thing. And this is, you don't have to title it the way I am. I just like to be super descriptive to the volunteers. But I'm going to say, if a file exists, this attachment type exists in their profile, but the status is rejected, we're going to share some other wording like click here to re-upload. And in this case, maybe I want to send them back to the same action link that I had before, where they have to upload the background check authorization. And maybe something like, upon review, your file was not accepted. Or maybe please re-upload. So this information needs to be generic, and so it can't describe what the issue is with the file. It can't say it was the wrong file or it was blurry, or so you can't get into those details. This is general information that's available to anyone who meets this criteria, but you can certainly let them know, hey, it's not been accepted. And so let's go ahead and save that. And so that's partial completion. Again, great for when you're collecting attachments. It's great for even applications that are submitted, things that they give you, you have to then take and review and then move to maybe an updated status. The same thing for reference checks. If you ever, if you are collecting references, you can let them know, hey, we received your information from the references, but now the ball is sitting in your references, or the references have been received from your reference parties, and now we are reviewing them to see if they're acceptable, and then moving them, moving them into approved or rejected status. So that's how you can use partial completion rules. All right, the next topic I want to talk about are prerequisites. So I mentioned earlier in VSys Live, when you list checklist items, anyone can click on any order. They aren't forced to go in, from top to bottom or from bottom up. People are able to click on any item in any order. But if the sequence of things matter to you, for example, they need to give you an authorization for a background check, like in my example, this authorization form needs to be done before I can go to my third-party background check vendor and process information about the volunteer before I can look for those results. So this item here, the background check results, I need it to be in sequence. So this item, my background check results, in order for this criteria to be met, this certification needs to exist in their profile, and it needs to be with a status of green. But I don't want them to see this, even though this is not something that has an action link. The volunteer can't click or do anything. I just want to let them know that it's pending staff review. What I want to do though is place a prerequisite and say, well, first, I need to have this done by you. If I click this, and you'll see these are all the items that exist on my checklist. So as you create more items, more will be displayed on here. But I can say the prerequisite is first that you do this background check authorization. And what this does is now I have an option here, the same like I did with my bypass. I can completely hide it. And I also have another option to provide some wording. So let's see if I decide to leave it. I can, instead of showing past pending staff update, I can remind them, to please complete the background check authorization. So I can remind them that they have to do that before we can see the results. Or I can completely hide it and not let them see this item unless the background check authorization is completed. The requirement has been met. And what does it mean, requirement met? It does not mean that it's partially completed. It has to be fully completed, meaning I have to have received that attachment from item number 2, and the status needs to have been approved before they can see it. So you have a couple options there. So if I have if I want all of my items done in that exact order. What I would have to do is go into each item and set prerequisites. As you can see here, it is multi-select, so I can even say, hey, both item 1 and 2 need to be done before item 3 is visible. If I save this, I can also come to item 4 and say, hey, don't show this, or, or only show it after this is done. So again, if I want to force a series, force people to do things in order, I would go into item 2 and say, you need to have done item 1 first. Go into item 3 and say, you need to have done item 2, and go into item 4 and say, you need to have done number 3 first. So that's how you can use prerequisites. And again, you can select one, more than one. I'm going to leave mine just simple here, just for demonstration purposes, and say they need to have seen this, and I have chosen to completely hide it so they cannot see this requirement until the background check authorization is completed. All right, the next topic I want to discuss is are some of the display options that we have now available to us. Display options that you can manage from within the checklist, a few things there, but definitely on the VSys Live side, changing what that looks like. And so before I go into the how-to, I want to just show you a copy of, or an idea of what it would look like for the volunteer. So some of the changes now in VSys Live is that we can put the checklist in a way that is cooler, cleaner, more visible to the volunteer. So I will show you how we indicate, stuff like this, like displaying the name in a certain way, or this text, the progress bar, you can add instructions. But if you notice here, these are the different items that I have to deal with. And so you'll notice that I have some numberization, so I'll show you how to put some numbers and how they are showing up as cards. So these are still something that can be clicked on and completed by the volunteer, but it's displayed this way, and this is not the only way that they can be displayed. So let's jump back into VSys One and show you a couple cool little features that we have display-wise within the checklist itself. So you may have noticed these fields here that I kind of seem to have ignored earlier, but I now will talk about this. So you have the ability to use Font Awesome icons. And if I hover over here, you'll see some examples of some Font Awesome codes that can be used. But if you visit online, if you just go to fontawesome.com and search your preferred icons, you can look for things like, for example, I like to use one called Circle Check when an item is done. It can be solid, it can be like this, it can be thin, it can be dual tone. So you can see here I have many options. And within each option, if I click into it, I'm given the code. Here's the Font Awesome code. So here's where I can kind of play around and say, do I want it like this? Do I want it a sharp view where it's very like rigid? Or do I want it in a solid or a light? So you can play with the different options. And then this code here is what you would put inside of the icons that you want. And so I already know that I want to use something that is in a Font Awesome regular format. And the code of the icon is called Circle Check. I like to use Circle Check when an item is completed. If the bypass rule has been met, I kind of also like to tell them, hey, you in a way have fulfilled that too. So I'm going to use the same one, Circle Check. But when the item is incomplete, I can either, and I like to stay with the same formatting, I can either do like just a circle and leave it blank. So it's like not, it's not checked off. So they need to address that. Or there's another one that I like to use called check exclamation. And so let's try that out. I'm going to save the options and refresh my copy of VSys long hold save so that you can see what that looks like on the volunteer side. All right, so now I've hopped back over to the VSys Live site, and you can see here is my circle exclamation, kind of drawing attention, alert, alert, get this done. So it doesn't have to be this. Maybe you want to use a little icon that's indicative of an orientation, like a little icon that is about a classroom or a training. Maybe this one is maybe a little shield because it is about background checks. Or maybe this one is like a handshake because you are agreeing, or maybe it's a good citizens award, something like that that is representative. It's really up to you. And these are just cool little features that you can customize and alert people. I like to, again, use these circle ones. Those are my personal favorites, but I'm going to go ahead and update the rest of my checklist in VSys One to add some more of that. So the other one that you can also add them to the partial completion as well. Another one that I like to use is for when something is partially completed and it's in pending. I like to use Font Awesome Regular Circle Pause. So letting them know, I like to stay with the whole circle theme, as you can tell, but it lets them know, hey, it's on hold. Just give me a moment, right? And the same thing with um, the font awesome code for the rejected ones. I actually like to call their attention by doing a circle, something called X mark, right? So those are just the icons. Within the rejected attachments, there is another display feature that I like to use. So when an item is partially completed, it will show up on here. Let's say this form. This one will show up in gray with black writing. And let's try that out. So let's go ahead and update or upload a document here so that we can see what that looks like. And I'm going to pretend that this document that I'm putting in there is it, and I'm going to do my signature and submit it. So the file has been submitted, and you can see here now it shows up in gray. Now, if the item was rejected, and I will go into VSys, and I will set in the background, I'm going to set that item to be rejected. All right, so on the back end, I went ahead and changed the status of this document. If you can see here, this is what it looks like when it's pending, but I'm going to refresh my window because now I've rejected it. So when I reject it, it looks almost the same as the pending one, except it says rejected, click here to upload, and it has that little X mark that a little icon, but I can change something else within VSys so that it actually maybe draws more attention. And let me show you what that looks like. So coming back into VSys One, into my partial completions, I'm going to go into this rejected one, and there's a little code called intake, intake dash checklist dash partial dash rejected. So putting this HTML class just as I wrote it here and saving it will impact how a rejected partial completion looks on the page for the volunteer. So let me refresh my page and see what that looks like. All right, so on here you can see how that intake checklist partial rejected class displays this rejected item differently. You don't have to use this. It's just another display option you can use. And this class obviously you would want to use it for rejected unless somehow you like this and you want to display it for all their other partially completed ones. But it's intentionally set like this for the partially completed rejected. So I've already talked about what you can do within the checklist. Now I want to show you what you can do within VSys Live, your settings, so that you can actually create this look or alternatives of this look. So let's jump back into VSys One, and I'm going to take us over to VSys Live. So I'm going to come out and go into VSys Live and into the site that I am working with. So a couple things that need to be in place in order to show the checklist the way I'm showing it on my VSys Live page. First and foremost, you need to have something called a merge template that is titled Eligibility Checklists for Info as cards. And so those little the boxes that are being displayed there, these are what we refer to as cards. So you need to make sure that this merge template is present within your copy of VSys. There might be some updates to other versions that you might need to have in place in order to use those, but the merge template, and then what we're going to do is go into the page in which that checklist exists. So how we display it on the website, on the VSys Live page for volunteers, is through listing. So within the page that you want to display those, you'll come into the listings option and select eligibility intake checklist and drag it into the region that you want to display that in. I've already done that. Definitely make sure that it's set for logged in visitors only, and if necessary, you can set any embedded visibility or just regular visibility rules. But once you are in here, there's some other items that you need to set in your listing. First and foremost, you want to change this display as a merge with header and footer, not the other options that you have there. They will definitely change the look. That will not accomplish what I'm showing you here. So definitely set that in place. Setting your checklist. So you can do this for various checklists if you have that. I only have the one. Obviously, like before, you can show it or hide it, I'm sorry, if it's been completed, or hide it if it's been abandoned. But down here, record merge template is where we want to select that as cards. We want to select the merge template here. And then we have a couple other configurable values here that I want to review. Okay, so the way I've accomplished what I have on my VSys Live page are a couple things here. So I will come back to this override colors in just a moment, but I've set mine to show item numbers. So whatever pertains to the volunteer, I have it where it's showing item numbers. And the reason I say that is because you may have, again, with wanting to create a sequence and 1 through 5 or 1 through 4, you might be tempted to, in the checklist, name the item number 1, medical clearance, or number 2, volunteer orientation. You might be tempted to do that, but I would say if you're using bypass rules, don't put it there. You want to click on here and show the items here. Because let's say out of the 5 items, I only need to complete 3 of them because I bypassed 2 of them. Well, I don't want to just see item number 1, number 2, and number 4, and it's going to show number 1, 2, and 4 because it's been labeled like that. I want VSys to kind of look at what items apply and automatically number them 1, 2, and 3. The other option I have here is to include the progress bar. If you don't like the progress bar, you can completely just uncheck this. But we want to set this complete. When it is completed, this is the wording when it's completed. This is the color of the text that I've chosen, the color of the background check, and the progress bar. If you chose to do a different color, you're welcome to do that. You can just put the hex codes in there. Another awesome feature that I have is maybe I don't like those tiny boxes. I can click here and make them full width. I'll show you that in a moment. I can also say, hey, all the items, show them in the same width, because as I'm displaying them here, I did have them, I'm making the system think of how big do they need to be and make them the same width, so they are the same width. So as of late, I've actually been using this feature where you just make them all full length, and so each item gets its own row. If you wanted to add a couple things like make sure my title displays a certain way or certain sections display with bolds, you can do that. And then down here, we have what the icons that I'm selecting. If I put any icons, these are the colors that the icons would be if I chose to go that route. And so you can override these. And then coming back up to the top, I said I was going to talk about override colors. If I click on that, I get more options. Maybe you want to change the checklist type, background check color, and what that means is up here, this is the checklist type. So this region, what background color do you want to use for here? Or what color do you want to use in the instructions? And so you can override, you can play with the different options. So no 2 checklists can look the same. So you can really, play with those. I choose to just keep the standard, but options are available. So I'm going to save this because I did set my items to be full width. I'm going to do my long hold and save, and I will take you back to the VSys Live page so that you can see how those changes render. All right, so I'm back at my VSys Live page and I gave it my refresh and I finished adding all my icons within the checklist. So this is what it would look like if it's full width. I am zoomed in a little here, so I'm going to zoom back out to 100% so you can see what it looks like in relation to my page. I just decided to focus it a little bit more and we have my dashboard, but this is how it would be displayed. So let's actually take the role of a volunteer and actually complete the item so you can see how they change the display changes. So I have a super easy training, one question that voila, I completed with success. So I've completed that item. And you can see here now it changes to a green. And if you remember, I had put in there about, need to review the content, giving the volunteer the option to review it. So this would be displayed also. This is how it would be displayed if it was bypassed as well, indicating that it would say here previously completed instead of completed. It would say previously completed because it was bypassed. And then it would still show these instructions on here so that they can go back and refresh their memory. You can see my progress has increased as well. I'm going to jump into my code of conduct, which is an agreement. I agree to, commit to that, and it takes me back to my home page. And again, that item is also completed. I may have missed that icon, so I will correct that. And then also I'm going to go back in on the back end and of my profile, I'm going to change, instead of rejected, I'm going to change it to approve so you can see what happens with that background check result that I set as a prerequisite that is hiding until this item is met. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, so I had gone on the back end into the profile and I set that authorization attachment to be approved. Once I do that, you can see I get my check mark because this item is done, and then it shows me this. There's an alert. This is set to incomplete, so it shows in red with my exclamation point, but it says pending staff update. And because I didn't put a finish link, it's not clickable. I can't do anything. And you also notice how the numbers automatically updated themselves. Again, why you want to use the set numbers in the configurations of the VSys Live page versus going into the checklist and actually labeling them number one, volunteer orientation, etc. So let me go into the back end and add this certification, add a good result, hopefully, on this person, and you can see what a fully completed checklist looks like, because you'll see instructions here in red, but this will change when all the items have been completed. All right, I'm giving my site a quick refresh now that I've gone to the back end and given this volunteer a good background check result certification. So you can see now how this changes because every item has been met, 100% completion, and this is what a fully completed checklist will look like. And so that's a couple things I just wanted to show you on this page. So to wrap up, I just want to talk about a couple best practices that I've discovered when working with these checklists. So returning back to my checklist here, a couple things that I just want to mention, best practices. When it comes to that percentage completion that you have, different items can be given different weights. So I can say, hey, orientation is super important. I'm going to give this 25% weight. And then you can change the percentage of the others. But if you are using bypass rules and prerequisites and things like that, where something will appear after another one is done, or where something doesn't need to be completed if they bypass, I would highly, highly recommend that you just don't mess with percentages. Let VSys do the thinking for you. Set all the percentages to 0 and let VSys do the calculations for you. Because these percentages that if you set them are independent of the actual items that are listed. So for example, if I only have to do items 2, 3, and 4, And I set my percentage to be 10%, 10%, 10%, totaling 30% altogether. On the site, it will actually display whatever I set. So if I do one item, it will show 10%. This next item, 20%. This next item, 30%. The volunteer is going to be left thinking, wait, I only did 30%, but the checklist is going to show as completed, which is going to be very confusing. So I would say leave the percentages as just blank and let the system do it on its own. The other tip that I also want to recommend, and this might be more of a newer feature, is we have this option now, set the date started to the current date when the checklist is first created. We've had people who think they want to report or notification sent to the volunteer if they've been sitting on their checklist for way too long. And unless you had explicitly gone into the person's profile and added maybe a start date, the system didn't really have a way to calculate that. So I would say if you have this feature, if you have the version of VSys that displays this, definitely check this. And what this means is anytime the checklist is added through whatever process, through automation or manually or whatever, that it will automatically say, okay, that is the person's official start date for the checklist. So doing that. And then if you want to get kind of fancy with the display here, when an item is completed, you can use some styling here like green or red like I did at the top when you're displaying things. So that wraps it up for me today. So thank you so much for coming along with me as I played with my checklist here, and I hope that it is helpful for you.